Hello, everyone. This is JJ Risha with Pismo Ventures. And today, instead of having a guest who will be talking about the entrepreneurial ecosystem, what we're talking about today is about marketing. So we have a free marketing webinar for all of you from Angelo Ponzi. Angelo, he will introduce himself in a few minutes. But before Angelo starts, I'll just take a couple of minutes to um, talk a little bit about what Pismo Ventures is doing. So we've been putting together weekly programs that are related to our entrepreneurial ecosystem, the startup ecosystem. We've been meeting with thought leaders and movers and shakers in the community, from angel investors to serial entrepreneurs to VCs, to anyone that could potentially contribute to providing valuable information to the startups. And what we're trying to do is really help our entrepreneurial ecosystem learn about what it takes to build, grow, and sell a business, because that's what we're all interested in. So before we get started, I just want to talk about the program. So today, Angelo is going to talk for about half an hour or so about what it takes to, from a marketing standpoint, what it takes to help startups with their marketing, and what it takes in order to run the right marketing program for startups. The second is we're going to talk about a workshop that we will be doing for the community in the next couple of weeks or so. We'll talk about that at the end. Before we get started, I just want to share what Pismo Ventures is doing. So Pismo Ventures is really a unique combination of a venture firm, a virtual accelerator, and a venture studio. We also have a software development arm to help our startup and our portfolio companies. So what we do is we help build businesses. We also invest resources, services, and cash into our companies. We also help develop software. We help portfolio companies as well facilitate with their funding. We open doors, which means we're trying to help them really grow and succeed. And we're building a fund this year. We're hoping to have it by the end of this year. We become and we are a true value-based hybrid cash and equity model for startups. And we engage with our portfolio companies on a month-to-month basis, no long-term contracts, and we are a true business partners and investors when it comes to our portfolio companies. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channels, please do it right now. Also, please follow us on social media so you stay abreast of all the new things that we bring to the table. We will talk at the end, towards the end, about the upcoming events and interviews we have. We have a really lineup for the next couple of months that you don't want to miss. Angelo, thank you for being part of this webinar today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to share some insights.
So some real insights. Angelo, tell us a little bit about your background and before we get started.
Well, what I'm going to do, JJ, if you don't mind, I actually have a few slides in my presentation as I go along to talk a little bit about me and my experiences, to bring some clarity, I guess, on who I am and why I feel I'm the right person to give this presentation.
All right. So the screen is shared and you can get started.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes, give or take, and we're going to talk about marketing as your growth engine. Now, I believe that marketing is really at the hub of everything. Some of my sales counterparts might disagree with that, but really, if we think about marketing for your business, for your startup, whether you're really at the infancy stage or whether you're at funding or building your product or service, or you're already a small business and you're already selling, really marketing is this engine, right? Because without building awareness, driving interest, bringing sales opportunities for the salespeople to go out and sell. But the other thing I want to say up front before we get going is I believe in kind of a holistic approach to marketing, because everything we do and everything you do in marketing is going to touch every aspect of your business, whether it's sales, whether it's operations, whether it's inventory, whether it's finance, HR. So really, that's why I talk about the fact that it really is at the core and at the center of everything you do. Now, when we think about planning, the goal really in developing your strategic marketing plan is to keep you what I call on the road to growth, right? To make sure you stay focused, to make sure everyone in your organization is aligned. So many times I've dealt with businesses, and one of the first things I do is I assess the leadership to find out, to make sure how different they are from an alignment of where they want to go in their business. And more often they're not aligned at all. So that's kind of the first step that I always look at, because you really need to have that alignment in order to be growing in the right direction. But it is not a straight road, as we saw on the previous slide. There's a lot of bumps and turns, twists, things going on that can really throw you off. And we're all sitting in it today with COVID-19 and this pandemic and pending recessions. And depending on how old you are, you might have gone through a few other recessions before. We will come out of this, but how you come out, I think, is the real one of the pivots today in this conversation of how you manage your marketing activities going forward. Now, as you start your business, there's a lot of different aspects that really have an impact on what you're doing, whether it's sales or crises like we're in today, different problems, taxes, competitions, employee marketing, for example. Now, I jokingly say planning is easy. It's not. But I say it's easy, but where it becomes difficult is really in the implementation. And this statistic that I use is that 90% of leaders claim their company fails to reach their strategic goals due to poor implementation. Now, that's really important, because so many times in my career that I've developed plans, and when I go back in and we have reviews, a lot of times the plans just were sitting on a shelf. Nobody's actually following them. Nobody's executing on them. So if you walk away with one thing today, it's about whatever you decide to do and how you implement, it has to be managed properly, and back to that alignment. We all have to be moving forward in the same direction. So who am I? I am a fractional chief marketing officer. That's what I do today. I actually spent a lot of time on the client side as everything from ad manager to CMO to chief strategy officer. I've owned and operated an advertising agency for over 20 years. And I also have had several businesses. My ad agency, which I started from scratch and grew and sold. I had a business in the action sports industry for 13 years, which it again grew from an idea. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along, to something that I was able to leverage. However, I've also had what I call dead bodies or litter on the side of the road. A lot of businesses that I had this great idea and it just never got traction. Or in 2008, 2009, I tried to start another advertising agency that just didn't go anywhere. Little did we know about what we were headed into during those times, and I just couldn't get any traction, and eventually that it died. But for me, I really position myself as providing consultation and fractional leadership, really from a strategic and analytical side of marketing, not the creative side. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, because ultimately we need to understand a lot of these different aspects, from your competition, from your marketplace, from your customers, before you can really get to the tactical side. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to focus on the importance of building this plan. So some of the brands that I've worked on, some of these you might recognize, and some of these are certainly bigger brands, from Kettle One Vodka, La Crema is part of the Jackson family wine estate. You can see a lot of alcoholic beverage up here. I have worked on a lot of Vice accounts, and I've worked both local, national, regional, and global accounts as well. And then here's some other ones from a tech side, construction, and even the one down here at the bottom, Path to Happy Success, was really started from scratch, and in building that whole program. And I actually got involved in building software for that one as well. So a lot of involvement. I also have a business podcast that offers a lot of business advice for small and medium-sized businesses. I encourage you to check it out. A lot of great content. So as I mentioned, when we think about the road to growth, I like to look at market dynamics, right? There's so many things internally that impact your business: marketing, sales, employees, finance, operations. But as we talked about, from that external side, the entire dynamics, you've got other things that are putting pressure on your business: competition, certainly politics that are going on today, technology, disruptive technology. Are you a disruptor, or can you be disrupted? And certainly the economy as that we are experiencing now. So all these factors have to be taken into consideration. And I call it keeping your pulse on the marketplace, keeping your finger on the pulse of the marketplace. You have to constantly be aware and monitoring what's going on. And that requires you to work on the business versus just in the business. So another point then is businesses do, and from all sizes, don't spend enough time working on their business. So I encourage you to think about that and setting aside time to make sure you're always looking at the bigger picture and looking at all these different influences that can impact the growth of your business. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes here. Why do startups fail? I'm sure you've all researched this, but it's important, right? 90% of all startups fail, period, right? Most common, 2 to 5 years fall into this category. A lot of times it's because now that you're in the marketplace and you're starting to grow, and maybe you found yourself a nice niche and you're looking attractive, now that you got competition. I've had businesses tell me over the years, oh, we don't have any competitors. We're the leaders in the market. And you have competition. No matter what you think, you have competition. So you always have to understand who they are and spend time learning about them. And we'll talk about that. Other factors, it could be pricing, it could be unfriendly products, market fit is wrong, poor marketing. So a lot of different factors that can happen along the way. I mentioned the action sports industry. When I started that, I was by myself. Nobody had a research company providing statistics in the action sports industry. Literally by year 5, and it was year 5, we were doing extremely well. And the next thing you know, I had competitor pressure. I have competitors coming out of the woodwork trying to claim that they're doing the same thing. It took a while, and I put most of them into their place. But a couple of them gave me some competition, especially internationally, where I was weak. And again, not paying attention to their customers. I have a client, 30 years old, less than 5 million, small business, that when I did customer surveys to try to find out what was going on in the marketplace, what they told me is they hadn't heard from management in well over a year. And they actually didn't know any of the new products and services that the company had developed. Why? Because the salespeople were only going back selling the same thing over and over and over again. So again, that gets back to keeping your finger on the pulse of the marketplace, including your competition, to become extremely important. Just a couple more on this, right? Cash flow problems, obviously, is a big one. And a lot of other reasons that can impact a business. So there's so many different factors that you have to always take into consideration. And these are much broader, but they always ultimately boil down to how they're going to impact your strategic plan. And the other thing I encourage you is, while I'm talking generically in a sense, you need to understand your specific vertical market, right? The industry that you've chosen, what happens there, what are some of the issues that are going to face you there. I also like to talk about any business that you're getting into, be passionate about it, right? Do something that makes your heart sing, if you will, right? Just don't do it because you have this great idea. A lot of great ideas. I call it the build it and they will come syndrome, right? The field of dreams. It's a lot of hard work to grow a business. And so you better be passionate about it. It can be something you're going to do in 24/7, 7 days a week for a very long time. So let's kind of start moving into a little bit more of the meat of this. And so these are some questions I want you to ask yourself, and not only today, but constantly. You've got to constantly be asking yourself these questions. Who are you selling to? Now, we could say I'm selling to this particular vertical market. I'm selling to an IT guy. I'm selling to a consumer. But you really need to dig down deep of who that person is and really understand them. You've heard the word customer persona. It's difficult to build. It takes time, but you really need to understand who you are selling, right? What do you say to them? So many times I run into companies that have a messaging strategy, but let's say they're targeting 5 different vertical markets. It's the same message across all 5. It just doesn't work that way. Why? Because the people that you're trying to sell to may have different motivations and needs and wants within those different verticals. And while the message you might be saying to one is not relevant to everybody else in the other verticals, right? So we're talking about relevancy here. Where will you sell them? That's another strategy that you need to be constantly thinking about. Where are they buying? Are they going to a retail store? Are they buying online? Right? You have to understand where those consumers are selling to. So back to who are you selling to? How are they consuming information? How are they making their purchases? The decision process or the journey. How will you lead them along through your funnel is an important aspect. And ultimately, why should they buy from you? Right? Becomes extremely important. So I asked the question, what business are you in, right? What do your customers really value about your products and services? The CEO of Black & Decker once said, people don't go into a DIY store because they need one of our drills. They go because they need a home, right? Wonderbra in their internal communications to their staff says, we do not sell underwear. We do not sell lingerie. What we sell is self-confidence for women. Harley Davidson does not sell motorcycles. It sells the concept of freedom for middle-aged men, right? Starbucks understands that their business is creating social experience, not just selling coffee. And Nike isn't in the shoe business. Nike is in the business of inspiring athletes and all of us. So you have to think about back to those other questions of why do people buy? They're not buying because they need a new piece of software, right? You're solving a problem. You have to understand what you really are selling them and what business you are in so they have an understanding of why they should buy, right? Scott Cook, founder of New, says a brand is no longer what we tell customers it is. It's what customers tell each other it is, right? So that is a clear understanding as we look at our strategic marketing aspects. So part of this then becomes, as we start to develop this plan, what is the size of the market and what is your revenue goals? Now, I believe when you're establishing your program, you need to set these milestones, but you need to go out into the future, whether it's a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan, understand where you want to be at that point in time and work your way back. An interview I did on my podcast was with an international marketing person, and they use what they called a strategy tree, right? She looked at the very top of the tree is the ultimate goal, and then worked her way down into the fuller branches to understand how they were going to layer up, if you will, to get to that goal. Now, once you have those goals, you have to understand where you're going to get that revenue from. Is it the existing market that you already have? Is it adjacent markets? Is it new markets? So one of the things we're talking about with this COVID is businesses are starting ready to come out of COVID. How are they going to get back to growing their business? It isn't going to be, this is over tomorrow and therefore revenue returns and everything is great in the next 30 days. This is going to be a long haul for businesses to come back, right? So we need to look at strategically, where is your revenue going to come from? And so when you're developing your plan, not only do you have to have the size of a market, I've seen business plans and frankly pitch decks where they say that it's a $10 billion marketplace. All I need is 1%. Well, that's great. How are you going to get there, right? It's about how are you going to get there? How are you going to get that revenue, right? Because as you start to grow, as I said earlier, and you start to have success, you're also going to grow competition. So we have to look at the opportunity then that exists out there. So when you think about that revenue goal, and you think about where you're going to get it from, opportunity. Now I look at the idea of your current customer base and perspective. Now, obviously, if you don't have customers yet, everybody's a prospective customer. And this gets back to who are you selling to and learning about your customers. And VOC stands for voice of the customer. It is so important that you invest your time in building your plan to go out and talk to the people you're going to sell your products and services to. Plain and simple. Like I said earlier about the field of dreams syndrome, you just can't build it and expect they'll come. Right? So you have to understand their motivations, their behaviors, their needs and wants. And you can do this through market research. from a qualitative standpoint, right? So that could be focus groups, it could be one-on-one interviews, to quantitative studies, which are the statistical things that you can use for projecting, right? Customer surveys. Survey says, as I like to say. So by digging into these different aspects, it is so important because that helps define your strategy. If you don't know why somebody buys, then how do you message them? How do you serve them up the right features or benefits of your product and service that makes them want, and it makes them want your product and services, and how you solve their needs, right? And so I believe this, and if you saw on my slide, I said I focused on insights, brand, and plan in that order, actually. And these are the insights that you're after. If you gather customer information, prospect information, you can find those nuggets, those insights that allow you to drive your strategies. This includes messaging strategies as well, because you're going to learn why they buy, what's important to them, what the competition is doing. So I really encourage you that in building your strategic plan, you have to set aside time to go out and talk to prospects. Now, the thing I hear a lot of is, it's too expensive, I can't afford it. Not really. There are things that I do, I call it grandmother research, where I'm kind of sticking my toes in the water. I'm doing one-on-one interviews with people, just trying to build an understanding so I know how they may behave when we start marketing to them. So this is extremely, extremely important. The other side of the coin is your competition. I believe every business needs to have an ongoing strategic competitive analysis plan, right? Establishing a competitive analysis program for your business. Why? Because competitors come and go, things are always going on, and you need to keep, again, that pulse on what's going on in the marketplace, right? We always have to understand how healthy the brand is, right? Because as things change, and back to those earlier slides of market dynamics and all these pressures that are going on, behaviors change. Right now, if you think about COVID and people coming back, you have to determine, is your brand still in alignment? Is your brand healthy? Do you have the cash that you need? Have you been investing in marketing? What's going on in operations? Can you get the inventory? I have a client that pulls inventory from China. They've got problems. Now they have to go into second sourcing, and they didn't set that up before things were going on, and now they're scrambling. If they start selling, their marketing does a great job, and they start selling more products and services, they actually don't have the inventory to build. So that's back to that holistic standpoint. So you have to know what's going on. You have to keep your fingers on the pulse. You have to understand how healthy your customers are, right? So not only about internally how healthy you are, but also how healthy is the market is right now, and the customers that you may be currently selling to are the ones you want to sell to. Maybe they're in a particular vertical market that's now been hit very heavily by COVID and this pandemic. And by selling to them, you're just not going to achieve where you need to go. So now you need to look, can you go to adjacent markets with products and services you already have, or do you need to pivot and build something completely different? So understanding then from a competitive standpoint gives you great insights, right? So identify maybe your top 3 to 5 competitors. Look at them, see how they're reacting. Have they published press releases that are indicating they're in trouble? Right? What's going on? And by understanding where they are and looking for kind of revenue share, say you're the last entry into the market, which is another one. Are you a challenger or are you a market leader? And again, how you message and how you behave becomes 2 different things. So if you're trying to come into a marketplace that has a lot of competitors, you need to understand, are you going to grow organically just by sales, or are you going to have to steal share? So all this needs to go into your strategic plan. Back to that mapping out. How are you going to get to those revenue goals that you want to achieve in a logical standpoint? And part of this might even be in your strategy that at a certain point, you're looking at acquisition for growth. So all those things need to be really thought out as you're going through that. What is your product and service advantage? Again, if you're all looking and saying the same thing, and not creating a clear differentiation for your product or your service with your potential customers, then it's just noise. So it becomes really important that you need to understand what your competitors are saying, what their offerings are, and looking for those points of differentiation in the marketplace that you can capitalize on. And part of that becomes the messaging and positioning that they're touting. What are their sales strategies? What channels are they using? Do they create opportunities for you, or are they creating barriers for your entry? So all those factors in this gathering of information before you even start to develop your strategic plan. The other, of course, is current customers and new markets. As I said, you can look at existing products and services to your current customers. It's interesting. I did a survey of business owners in Orange County last year. And one of the things I asked them was, do your customers understand the products and services that you offer? And the answer was no. 95% said my customers do not know all the products and services that we sell. So that became really interesting to me because there was potentially a lot of revenue being left on the table that they weren't capturing, that maybe their competitors were, because they just weren't talking about it. So when you can look at a kind of a sales strategy, you can be selling more to the customers you already have, right? You can create new products and services to go off into new markets, or you can take your existing products and services into new markets. So what are those adjacent markets or brand new markets, and how do you investigate those? Again, part of your strategy for growth might be a point in time where you've saturated the market. I have a client that is really based and focuses on Southern California. Well, they're getting to the point where they just can't start to hit their revenue goals unless they leave this marketplace. So where do they go? How do they get there? Where are the best opportunities for them to use the products and services that they have without having to create new stuff in order to grow? So all these factors, again, become important in your strategic plan. Now, one of the things that we talk about a lot is, that tactical side, which I'm not really talking a lot about today, but ultimately, if we look at that journey, your customers consume information and they consume it in a wide variety of different channels. So during that, we'll do a simple funnel here: discovery, interest, and consideration. What are those pieces of communications along the way that you need to make sure you're communicating your products and services that are going on? So again, that tactical side, back to how do they consume information, what's important to them, what's relevant. And hopefully you can start to see that those initial pieces of data that you collect and develop a plan all filter out into all these different areas that have an impact on your long-term strategic growth plan. And again, it really is about that, laying that strategy and understanding how you're going to get there. And especially now with what's going on with this, we're seeing, looking at like 90-day sprints for marketing activity, where you go out there, lay that, your plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, and think about the dealing with short-term, mid, long-term. So how are you going to get? You're going to get to the next 90 days that gets you to 90 days after that, So your plans really need to adjust a little bit. But again, none of it gets you there. Answer these questions to show how you're going to achieve the goals that you set for yourself, right? Just saying, I want a 10% market share means nothing if you can't get there, if you can't show why you're different. So people, again, want to buy your products and services. So as I've been saying, it's really about starting with the end in mind, right? So if you go out into the future and know that goal that you want to get based on some logical approach and work your way backwards, you have a much better chance of achieving that, as opposed to saying, I want to be out there and I'm going to start today, and you start working towards it. And so that's why I think it's really important that you set realistic expectations and then working backwards to help develop those strategies. Now, there's certainly lots of different strategies, and this little chart kind of thinking about growth. So if you have your existing markets and existing products and services, that's really a different kind of strategy, right? That's a market penetration or a share strategy. How are you going to get there? If you have existing markets and new products and services, again, are you developing products and services? I think innovation and being innovative and always keeping a pulse on what are the changes going on so you can adapt very quickly becomes really important. And then certainly as you look into new markets, can you use those existing products and services and expand into new markets? We see so many times companies are pivoting or utilizing the tools and the programs that they have to get into new markets. We saw that, frankly, with COVID, as a lot of companies pivoted and got into the healthcare industry, if you will, that weren't necessarily in it, but because of their offerings, they were able to pivot and get into a new industry to help keep their business growing during this program. And then certainly new markets and new services. That's a diversification strategy. And again, why would you go there? When you think about new markets and entering new verticals, for example, you need to do everything we've been talking about. Who are the competition? How many are there? Who are the leaders? Does somebody own a significant market share? How easy it is going to penetrate? Years ago, I worked in an industry where the leader owned 70% of the marketplace. And the company I worked for wanted to offer products in the same industry. And it's like, we originally didn't think if we were lucky, we'd get 10%. And that's all we were trying to get. And after a while, long story short, the leader ended up buying the product because we were starting to encroach on 20% and they were getting concerned that we would start to eat into their share. So again, you need to look at all these different aspects because they do have an impact on your strategic growth plan. So when we think about plans, then they get comprehensive, right? So if I look at this chart, if you will, and look at kind of the different aspects of things we were talking about today, but thinking about your brand. So a VIRO analysis, VRIO is valuable, rare, imitate, and operational efficiencies. So what does that mean? It's a way to help determine your point of differentiation from your competitor. And based on those criteria, it gives you an opportunity to determine how valuable will be, frankly, to you in the marketplace. SWOT is. I believe in SWOTs, but I also highly believe in utilizing them.
Angelo, you're
trying
breaking
to
up.
work with them in your business. I worked with a company one time when we were in a strategy meeting, and they had put a SWOT that they had developed on the table. And I said, well, have you been doing this long? They said, yeah, we've been doing it for the last 5 years. And I said, well, I'd like to see all 5 of them. And they gave them to me, and they were almost identical. They'd actually never done anything to, fix the weaknesses or minimize the threats. So again, these aren't just things you do for a plan to look pretty and nice that you can go and, these are operational tools that you need to help move your business. Voice of the customers, we talked about, your value proposition, personas, positioning, messaging, pricing, competition, how much revenue how much market share do they have? Are they a leader? Again, are they a challenger? Are they strong in one area and weak in another? A lot of things I saw in the action sports industry, for example, we might have a brand that was really strong down in Texas. Actually, this was an interesting thing. I published a report saying that XYZ was the leader in the industry, and I had this brand call me and tell me I was wrong and that they were the leader. Well, now my data was challenged. I had to prove I was correct or incorrect. And long story short, they were right. They were the leader in a small region down in the Texas area, but on a national basis, nobody knew who they were, right? So if I was to go into that marketplace as a challenger, then they would become, the leader in that marketplace I would have to deal with. But as they moved into other markets, competition changes. So again, you need to know these different things. Sales distribution strategies, right from the competition, products and features that they're offering, pricing, customer focus. And I kind of skipped over a little bit about perception. And what is the perception of your brand and your competitor's brand in the marketplace? Right, knowing back to what the customers think. There's questions you can ask. Understand how brands are perceived. Again, is there opportunities created because of bad perceptions? Is there a target audience? Again, what are the needs, wants, and pain points of their behaviors or personas? Their criteria for purchasing. Back to personas, especially as you look at different articles. Consumer persona is going to be very different from, say, in the tech world where you might be dealing with the IT guy, with a CFO, and the IT manager that all get involved in the decision to purchase. You have to have personas for all of them. You have to understand what's the hierarchy that's going on, and then certainly sales and distribution. So when I talk about creating a strategic plan, these are the kinds of things that we need to look at. These are the things that need to go in to that plan to identify and show how you can reach and achieve the goals that you're really targeting. And I create the others over here like HR and finance, as I mentioned earlier, because everything you do has an impact on all aspects of the marketplace. One of the things that, and in talking to JJ, we're going to be offering a marketing workshop. So taking this from a 30-minute kind of overview to really details and helping you work the criteria for developing a plan. But there's 10 questions I always want you to ask yourself, right? Think about, can you answer yes or no on these, right? Do you know which customers are most valuable in terms of potential revenue and profitability? I worked with a client, they had 5 vertical markets, and they were using their marketing budget equally across all 5. After we dug into it, only 3 were really returning a value. That's where all the revenue was coming from. And the other 2, they were getting some sales, but certainly not worth the 40% of investment that they were making. So they didn't really dig down. They were just doing what they thought was correct. But at the end of the day, we were able to shift those dollars and get more revenue out of the verticals that we were in and spend less and do a little more targeting in those non-verticals. Do you truly understand your buyers and how they make their purchase decisions? Again, things we've been talking about. Why do I go into a particular brand? Why do I buy a particular brand? What kind of research do I do before I make brands? So there's a statistic out, and it's probably changed a little bit. We used to say that 70% of all research is done on the internet for B2B purchase decisions. So if you're not out there and you haven't already been part of that 70% of the research that was done prior, chances are you're never going to get into that decision-making process because they don't know who you are, right? And depending where you are in your process, right, is you're building awareness, you got to build interest, consideration, right, and trial. We look at a funnel that way. So if you're not even in the awareness stage and they don't know who you are, you're certainly not going to end up. So again, understanding how they make those decisions and being part of that. Is your brand message differentiated, right? What you do and who you are. If we're all saying the same thing, then there's no clarity, there's no relevancy. I worked with this company in a healthcare situation where all their competitors were saying the exact same thing. I mean, literally the exact same thing, using the exact same words. After doing research, we found that we were able to isolate some of those words and phrases because they were important decision-making criteria for the customers. But once we understood that, we were able to reword those, restructure those words and phrases into something that stood apart from the competition, right? So it's really important. Do your customers and prospects truly understand the problem that you solve and how you do it better? Sounds simple, we think we know. But again, how are you communicating that? How are you doing that in your demos? Are you producing marketing content that your customers need and when they need it and in the form they want it? That sounds silly. Right now, we always thinking, let's go to video, let's do video, let's do video. Well, depending on who your audience is, even potentially how old your audience is, frankly, the older they get, they still like paper. It might, case studies might still be white papers, might still be the aspect that you need based on who your customer is. So again, how do they consume that information becomes very important, right? Are you allocating your marketing resources based on specific objectives? We talked about that, right? Understanding where you're spending your money. It's not just about spending money, it's about spending it efficiently to make sure you're getting returned on investment. Do you have more A players than C players, right? Are you all rowing in the right direction? When we start this business and as you add more bodies to your businesses, it becomes important to understand who they are. And a lot of times we look at our core values as a way of setting the culture up and making sure that people you're bringing in are in alignment, right? You just don't want to bring somebody in, again, as like I said earlier, and a lot of times when I first start off by having interviews with the C-suite, understanding whether they're in alignment. And more often they're not, they're just not in alignment. And so it becomes really important, especially in the early stages, that the people you bring in are the right fit. Is your marketing, if you're doing it already, generating the leads that helps your sales team? Again, it's not just about bringing in leads, it's bringing in the right leads. You customize your campaigns and content for specific vertical markets. Again, making sure that what you're saying is relevant to the various verticals that you're targeting. And Lastly, are you making marketing decisions based on data? Right? There's so much data out there, whether it's internal or externally, whether you're doing it and gathering it from a quantitative or qualitative, or you're utilizing secondary research. There's information out there that you want to use to help you make decisions. I talk about there's a lot of different case studies that I talk about, but one I always like to use is a display company that was rushing to the market to come out with a 3D television, and they were so anxious, and there was the competition. Avatar had just come out and 3D experience, and it looked like that would be the next big thing. And so anyway, they got to market first, and they were in and out of the market in less than 5 years. It just failed miserably. And when the post-analysis was that consumers just didn't like wearing 3D glasses. They didn't want to watch TV all the time wearing 3D glasses. Now, if they had taken the time and maybe gone out and understood whether consumers would do that, they might have not gone down that path. And more importantly, in the boardroom, that question actually came up, and it was ignored, saying we're not worried about that. Again, a lot of times you have to get outside of your own head, out of your own boardroom, if you will, to make sure that you're getting the right input from your marketplace and not just you. I always ask myself, am I a consumer of the product and services that I'm selling? I just recently dealt with a gentleman who came out of retirement, started a business. He was in the engineering side. Now he has a consumer product. And he was making some conscious decisions based on his personal beliefs. And he was 80, and the target market was 18-year-olds. So again, it wasn't relevant because he didn't really have the experience. He was not the target market. So I ask you that. So just kind of sum up is what we want to offer here is we're going to be putting together a 2-hour sessions on June 18th and June 25th. We're going to be really digging into and helping you in an interactive standpoint develop your opportunities and your challenges based on size of market, working with your SWOT, your voice, your customers, personas, and journeys. We're going to really help you try to fill in and gather this information to help you complete your strategic marketing plan. There's going to be some homework and a workshop, and then we're going to come back again a couple of weeks later where we're actually going to work with you to help build this plan and have this interaction so you can ultimately develop and enhance your go-to-market strategy and all the different aspects. And then ultimately the price for these workshops, if you register on or before June 14th, is $99. This is the bargain. And June 15th to June 18th, you will see the price will go up slightly. So
thank you, Angelo. That's really great. I really appreciate all the insight. We have a bunch of questions coming your way. Are you ready?
I'm fire them away.
All right. So first question we have is, displaying it on the screen, what are reliable and responsive metrics for determining if your marketing dollars are achieving actual growth target?
Sure. That's really interesting because I get asked that question all the time. And my first response, of course, is we need to do some research. But recently I had a client in the software industry, and they were trying to determine how they could do measurement. And return on investment is really interesting because it doesn't always necessarily equate to a revenue dollar, depending on what it is. So for example, and I'll give you two answers. For me and my podcast, I have a conversion rate of if I can get people to listen to the podcast, then I'm happy. So I have them on my website, so I can tell how many people have clicked through, because it's not a revenue generator, it's an awareness builder. So what I've done for other companies is I've gone into their industries and I've identified statistics that have already been developed, benchmarks, and I've gone through and laid those out. So you can go into your industry, and there's some generic ones as well, or kind of broad stroke ones for technology and software or restaurants and fast food, based on a whole bunch of different criteria. And so I've used those to set the primary benchmark, And then once you start, you can start making those adjustments as you go along.
All right, that's good. So same listener, 2684 Gall. Please speak to the timing and depth of marketing involvement in very early stage ventures, i.e. when an MVP is still to be developed.
Well, I think that, and again, I'm going to interpret marketing is, and I hear this a lot, people think of it as tactical activities, and it's really not. Okay, as I've been trying to hopefully communicate here today, it's much broader from that strategic standpoint. So even when the product is being developed, have to still begin that process of understanding the market, right? So, let's say you're in early stages and ultimately you're going to even put together a pitch deck and you're going to go out and you're going to talk to JJ here and you're going to show him what you're going to achieve. Again, everything I just said, as far as understanding the marketplace from a customer standpoint, from a competitive standpoint, so you have very specifics on how you're going to reach your goal. So from understanding your customers, understanding the marketplace itself, understanding the competition, I think as soon as you start, you need to start digging into that, because again, it's going to have some impacts. I worked with a software company that was developing a telemedicine program. And when they came, they had 25 features that they wanted to build into their software. And they wanted to prove to their investors that the money that they needed, and they looked at timing it was going to take to build. Long story short, we went out to the marketplace and talked to doctors that would actually use this. And we were able to find out all sorts of great information. But more importantly, we found that they only needed 5 features to really become a viable product. And so by doing that, it means they needed less money. It means their time to market was going to be much quicker. And so instead of this 3-year development process, they were able to shrink it down to almost less than a year. And so that becomes very important. So because they knew this information, it helps shape the product that they were building.
Thank you, Angelo. So Sandy is asking questions. How do you gear your approach to what the world will be in 4 months?
But you know what? I've got my crystal ball here. Yeah, really, man. It's funny. I actually had a conversation this morning about that. We can't abandon kind of the logical approach, the strategic approach to marketing because of what happened. History has shown, and I've written articles on this, that companies that, and we'll take on the recessions, in the last 3 recessions, there were a lot of industries, there's data out there that supports the fact that companies that found kind of this operational balance, and not those that cut everything to save cash, and not those crazy ones that took their cash and invested in marketing because they thought, they could capture more share. But it was really that kind of operational aspect of it that allowed companies that did that to actually come out of the recessions much stronger than their competition. So it's kind of difficult to say what is going to happen, but if you just step back and look at the things we've talked about today, what's your current market? How healthy is your business? But more importantly, what about the people that you're selling to? If you're selling an industrial product, for example, I'm making this up, and the market you're going to sell to has been really impacted by this pandemic, well, you're not going to get the sales that you need. You're not going to be able to grow your business the way you want. So that gets back into now, should I pivot? Is there an adjacent market that I could start to look at that maybe I can make some modifications to expand? So by looking at these kind of sprints, if you will, these call them 90-day sprints with your marketing activities, it gives you a chance to adjust to, again, keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on and constantly make adjustments as you're going along. So by doing them in a shorter time frame, are you getting to where you need to be? Are things not working? And you can make those adjustments just very quickly.
Thank you. So I've been getting email questions as we're going through. So this is an interesting one. What is traction?
As far as getting traction in the marketplace,
I
or
mean, is it dollars? Is it customers? That's what I'm guessing. The
yeah,
what they
well, I mean, I think in for me getting traction in the market, I mean, again, it's back to what's the criteria that you're judging it by.
yeah
If it's new customer acquisition, are you getting the traction that you need and opening up a new marketplace, acquiring the customers that you're after,
yeah
or are you frankly spinning your wheels and pounding your head against the wall and wondering why you're not getting it? So
yeah
part of it is back to setting that criteria. What are those benchmarks that you're trying to achieve? Right? We just
yeah
don't pull those out of thin air. The old I'm going to grow 10% or I'm going to acquire, 10 new customers next month. Hey, great. I love it. How are you going to get there? Are you
yeah
getting the traction into those markets? And again, constantly monitoring back and forth. One of the things when I develop marketing plans is a huge section on measurement and KPIs and how we're going to judge whether we're moving forward or not and achieving what we need to achieve.
Okay. Um, Here's another one. The question is, I keep hearing the word product market fit. What does that really mean, and does it apply to service as well?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So, and I liken it back to my field of dream syndrome, right? Build it and they will come. So, as you're building your product or your service and creating your service, you need to understand, is there a need in the marketplace for it? How does it fit within there? And does it make sense? Is there a back to some of the charts I showed? Is there a demand by the marketplace for it at all? You don't want to spend all your time creating a service or building a product. At the end of the day, it doesn't fulfill a need out there. So
Yeah.
really, is that product fulfilling that need? And again, is there a fit in the marketplace for it? And again, now you're looking at, where does it fit? Right? Is it fit on top of 10 other competitors that are doing the same thing, or is there a niche that you can go to? So really back to understanding that for me, the customer is there a need and want for the product or service that you're creating?
So really, I guess part of this is really making sure that there's enough research done to make sure the product or the service you're providing is really the right product for the market. Is there to make sure there's a demand for it? Does that make sense?
Well, absolutely. Otherwise, we're just creating something that goes on. I go back to my action sports days. So I was doing research for one of the big retailers in the industry, and for 10 years, and I constantly met all the leaders in the action sports industry, and they kept saying, "I wish there was data like this. I wish there was stuff like this," and I couldn't
Yeah.
believe that there wasn't. So when I did some investigation, it turned out to be back in the 80s, there was a guy named Steve Sakamoto who walked up and down the beach and interviewed kids on the beach and surfers, and he wrote a report called Surf Report or the Beach Report, and he published it, and that was it. When he passed away somewhere around 87, one of the magazines decided to pick up where he left off, and they spent, I don't know, $100,000 on a big research study, and they sold six. Market didn't want to pay $6,000 or $7,000 for it. And then I came along in the late 90s, early 2000s. So there was nobody doing this. And so, when I started though, I took a different tact, and what I was creating, there was no fit in the marketplace for it. There was no need, because I was going after consumers in general, drilling down to skateboarders, for example.
Yeah.
And but in the action sports, the market I really was targeting, they didn't care, right? Didn't meet their needs until I shifted and started interviewing thousands of skateboarders and surfers and snowboarders, for example. So I was going down the wrong path. The product was not the product that was needed by the marketplace, and I was headed for failure. And so I pivoted.
Yeah. Very interesting. Here's a question from Hogni. Are the leading indicators per industry for web traffic, click-throughs, bounce rates, etc., publicly available or in pay to access a database? I'm looking for data in the legal lead generation industry.
Yeah, I've been surprised. I'm a big believer in looking at, reports that have been published. And so I'm going to say yes. it's going to take some time to find it. And but like when I was working in this particular software, and it was for a very specific industry, I was able to find some data that supported at least setting those benchmarks to measure again. So I would say that would be the place to start, is just doing research. It could be a report from one of the associations, as I'd always look at articles within specific verticals as a place to start.
All right. Last question for you, and then after this question, Angelo, I'm going to do some closing. While I'm doing the closing, I want you to think of only one recommendation from a marketing standpoint for entrepreneurs that are listening to us. Just one. But this last question is this: it's what is the problem with startups saying, I just need 1% of a $10 billion market? I know you mentioned it during the webinar. That's my question to you. What's the problem with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with saying that. The problem is how you're going to get there, right? And I've seen it before. I've been involved in presentations where these goals, and I'll call them lofty goals. 1% of the $10 billion market is pretty big. There's these lofty goals with no strategy to get there. By just saying I can do it, it doesn't really work. And so that's why having these different pieces, and there's a lot of kind of details that if we were to dig in today and really build a plan, there's a lot of details. But ultimately, if I'm going to stand in front of you, JJ, and pitch my product or services, I'm going to take all that very succinctly, communicate. So not only can I say I want 1% of a $10 billion market, if I can tell you how I'm going to get there and have some support and saying I've talked to customers and I've done this and I've done that, I probably have more a likely chance of you being interested, as opposed to saying I just want it. If I want one, I might as well grab two.
Yeah. All right. So I'll do some closings while you are thinking of one recommendation. So thank you all for joining us today for the webinar. Again, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is YouTube/Pismo Ventures, and follow us on social media. The other thing I wanted to say that this recording for this program that we have today will be available on YouTube under the Pismo Ventures channel by tomorrow morning. The workshop that Angelo spoke about, it will be on June 18th for 2 hours from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then also on June 25th. So it's 2 sessions, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on June 18th, Thursday, June 18th, and Thursday, June 25th. The early bird pricing is $99 for both workshops. After the 14th of June, it will be $149 for both workshops. We have a great lineup coming up next week and the week after, and for the rest of June and July. Next week, we have Richard Sudek. Richard Sudek is the Chairman Emeritus of Tecos Angels, and also he is the Executive Director for the Cove, which is the UCI Beal Applied Innovation. So don't forget to sign up for this. You can sign up on Eventbrite. It is just pismoventures.eventbrite.com. Week after that, we have a venture capitalist, Jeff Bocan, and Jeff is with Okapi Ventures. All right. So, Angelo, what's your one recommendation?
Know your customer. It's been a mantra of mine for years and years and years. That, to me, is the key. And you have to know them intimately. And so if I would say, if you're going to do one thing tomorrow, spend your time getting to really know your customers and the various vertical markets that you are selling to or want to sell to.
That's amazing. Let's see. It looks like we have one more comment. No, that's a thank you. Thank you, Anthony. Well, thank you very much, Angelo. I really appreciate this. I think we will see you in a couple of weeks on June 18th for the workshop.
I'd like to say one thing before we part. My plan for the workshop, for those of you that sign up, it is interactive. Okay, my goal is not for me to be just telling you stuff. We're going to work at it. So one of the things that I will ask JJ to do for those that sign up is to find out who you are in the industry that you're working in, so we can make some things that are a little more relevant to you. You will have homework, and you will come back, and we'll apply that. So look at this as, really as truly as a workshop and not certainly a lecture, because I want you to feel that you're getting a lot of value for what you're doing, and at the end, have something that you can utilize.
All right. Thank you very much, Angelo. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.
And being part of this innovative and creative entrepreneurial and startup ecosystem. We will see you online all the time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.